the activity starts today, Monday, whereby we receive a number of political leaders from the British Overseas Territories. On Wednesday, the Premier is hosting this year's pre-Joint Ministerial Council meeting for UKOTA members. That brings together all of the leaders from the British Overseas Territories to talk about issues relating to the overseas territories and the UK, talking about Brexit, talking about political initiatives that the UK government are contemplating outside of Brexit and how that affects the overseas territories. And this year we've injected the main topic of trade and economies, because the overseas territories, whilst very diverse, are very similar in size, very diverse in relation to the geography. You know, you have some in the South Pacific, some in Europe with Gibraltar, some off Argentina and the Falklands, and of course you have a core in the Caribbean. So it brings together all of the political leaders to talk about the issues relating to everybody. And if there is a cluster of overseas territories like the Caribbean that has a specific issue just relating, let's say, to hurricane preparedness and preparation, etc., then we can take that off as a group to talk with the UK government about if it's necessary. Well, I think this year, the fact that we're celebrating the 60-year anniversary of our Constitution is a pivotal moment in Cayman's history, and the fact that it was accepted that Cayman would host it here, and that we were able to arrange it to be hosted the week before our celebrations. It naturally brings all of the leaders from the overseas territories over, and most of them have decided to stay throughout the weekend and celebrate with us, celebrate the 60-year anniversary of our Constitution, and what that means, what that relationship means with the Cayman Islands and the UK. And that's something that's, no matter how diverse we are, that's something that combines us and is the common thread, is the relationship with the UK. Well, Brexit, that has been the be-all and end-all of my time in the UK. When my family and I landed in the UK on the 2nd of July, it was literally a week after the referendum happened, and over 17 million people voted to leave the European Union. You had a scenario whereby David Cameron, the then Prime Minister, had given his notice, said that, you know, he was not the captain to sail the UK out of the EU, and what we had as I landed was a campaign to see who the next Prime Minister was, and of course Theresa May won that. She tried her best over the last 3 years for the UK to leave the EU with the best possible deal that she thought she could negotiate, but she simply could not get that through her Parliament, and failed 3 times in trying to get it passed. So as a result of that, she's resigned, and now as I'm leaving, the UK has not left the EU, but we have yet again another leadership contest whereby either Jeremy Hunt, the current Foreign Secretary, or Boris Johnson, the previous Foreign Secretary, will be the Prime Minister and will be the person responsible for trying to, again, navigate the UK outside of the EU. Both gentlemen have very different views, very different strategies about how he plans to do so, and most importantly, how he plans to convince the Parliament that whatever that means, whatever the strategy is the best thing for the UK, whether it be that they leave the EU without a form of a deal, which means there's a lot of interesting titles that, you know, a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit, whether it means that they crash out or that they leave with a deal that has been negotiated. Because on the other side of this, and just as important, if not more so, is the European Union. And a lot of this gets lost. That gets lost on who's involved in this. And they have been, if you will, the consistent arm in all of this to say, this is what we're willing to negotiate. We've negotiated this. You either do this or you don't. But there's no more negotiating. And as we see that the leadership challenge and contest further develop in the next couple of weeks, because by the 22nd of July we expect to know who the next Prime Minister will be. Out of all of this, regardless of what change comes, the EU still remains consistent, and what they have done is agreed to a 6-month extension, which now is the 31st of October, Halloween, which I think is quite, we don't know if it's going to be a trick or a treat, but it's interesting to see all of the media coverage and the meetings that I attend and the various individuals that I speak to, whether from a formal meeting to a reception. It's always from a UK point of view. It's very rarely taken into the context of a bilateral relationship with the UK and the EU. It's very, dare I say, self-centered. So it's going to be interesting. Well, 3 years ago, almost to the day now, the UK decided that they wanted to leave the EU by a referendum. They have since tried to understand what that actually means and how they're going to do so, and what the relationship will look like with the European Union after they leave. It's safe to say that there has not been unity within the Parliament, who is responsible for facilitating this Brexit, in 3 years. And we've seen now 2 Prime Ministers come and go because of it, in David Cameron and now Theresa May. What it means for Cayman, and we have to understand and respect this, that our constitutional relationship says that the UK remains responsible for our international relations and internal security. Now, we do have the governor here, and he's the Queen's representative and the key individual to further strengthen the relationship on island. But as the UK now looks to recreate its own global identity, it's just natural that their bandwidth, their physical capacity in trying to represent Cayman's specifically, or other overseas territories, international interest is going to be diminished. We just have to accept that, and they accept it too, because since that they have opened, I think it's 30% more foreign offices, embassies in other areas. I understand now they're opening in the Bahamas again, and in other places in the Caribbean. So as they look to expand and reestablish themselves as an independent country outside of the European Union, it is just factually so that their ability to represent Cayman's international relations interest is going to be diminished. As a result of that, the government took the view to create the new Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs, whereby now I, as the Chief Officer, in line with government policy, essentially will look to fill that gap. And working with the UK government, because understand they still retain that responsibility, working with the Governor's Office, working with the FCO, working with the UK government, to represent Cayman's interests ourselves. And that is one of the reasons why we have developed and we're hosting the inaugural UK and Overseas Territories International Trade Summit this week, whereby it's a day-and-a-half high-level government summit, piggybacking off of the fact that we're hosting the Pre-JMC. We have all of the political leaders here. We have the UK Minister, Lord Ahmad, and the Premier McLaughlin and Lord Ahmad are co-hosting this. It's the first of its kind, whereby we are leading the way, Cayman is leading the way for the benefit of all overseas territories to attune the relationship, understanding the realities of Brexit, but attuning and perfecting the relationship whereby we leverage every possible opportunity of the UK and where they already have an interest in a place that we're looking to establish ourselves, let's say Hong Kong, then we leverage the infrastructure and the resources that they've had for hundreds of years. The main objective of the International Trade Summit is to discuss the opportunities and synergies between the overseas territories themselves and the UK government to what opportunities are there for us to leverage expertise, physical plant where necessary, and future initiatives. As an example, one of the things that we started to do is through our engagements in the UK, we were able to learn early on about an international festival of innovation, and it's called the Great Festival of Innovation in Hong Kong. And this was something that was hosted by the UK government's Department of International Trade, and Liam Fox, who is the Secretary of State for that, was leading on this. And we were able to learn early on that they were doing so, and through our positive interactions with the Department of International Trade, that then allowed them to invite Cayman to form part of the official delegation. So this was the first time now you have the UK government looking to promote itself to Asia, in Hong Kong, to talk about why they're innovative, why people should do business in the UK. And now Cayman, through our positive interventions, were invited to be a part of that. So as a result of that, we had the Premier lead a delegation. We had Minister Hugh sit on a panel to talk about luxury tourism. We were able to have Minister Rivers talk about Cayman and FinTech, and Dr. Shetty attended as well, to talk about healthcare. So in this forum, on a platform that the UK had established, we were able to participate in that and advance and promote Cayman's interest, utilizing something that the UK was naturally doing. We want to have more discussions about that to see what else is available for us throughout the world for the benefit of our economy. Well, the entire schedule of this was designed to be around the 60-year anniversary of the Constitution, because we wanted to have as many political leaders, cousins, if I can call them that, here with us. The common thread that brings us all together is that constitutional relationship with the UK. So the fact that we're celebrating the 60-year anniversary of ours is very relevant for them. And it also gives us an opportunity as a country to reflect on where we are, who we are, where we've come from, and where we want to go. I was saying earlier today, you know, I think one key reality and statistic that is poignant in this conversation as we talk about development, and whether it's about ports or it's transportation or waste management, population growth, et cetera, et cetera. I think one key statistic that brings it together is where Cayman was as a population in 1959. We were under 10,000 people. I think it was closer to 8,000 people, if memory serves me correctly, but certainly under 10,000. And now we're edging up towards 70,000, okay? That level of growth is fascinating, phenomenal. I mean, it is who we is, but it's our reality now. It's our reality now that that's who we are. If we take the fact of where we were and where we are now, and then take it to 60 years from now, just going on statistics, not saying that it's a reality or something that I want, but going from 10,000 to 70,000. If we're at 70,000 now, 60 years from now, we'll be over 500,000 people. Again, I'm not saying that's where I want to go. I'm just saying if we look at where we've been to understand where we're going, it sort of lends itself to further exponential growth. So in that context, it should then frame the mind of all of us as Caymanians, with children, with grandchildren, starting, or I should say continuing to think generational. So I think that is what the 60-year anniversary of the Constitution certainly does for me, and from the conversations I've had with others, it does for them as well. It's a birthday. You know, when I celebrate our birthday, and our birthdays are very close together, it's a time for me when I remember it, of what's happened in the previous year, and I think as we all celebrate the 60-year anniversary of our Constitution, it's time for us. It's a moment for us to reflect and appreciate where we've been, and come together and talk about where we want to go.